Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order. This is the February regular session, the 7th regular session. First order of business is our invocation. Councilmember Brubaker.
Both tonight and in all our deliberations, may we possess wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, and finally, for us up here, for the staff, for our audience, for the community out there, and indeed all of us in this great nation, may we have personal peace in our lives and find joy in the hard tasks that we all confront.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Announcements are following our rules of procedure that we adopted on December 18th, 2012. Just a reminder that use of cell phones during meetings is restricted. All correspondence for distribution to elected officials should be provided to the City Clerk and include a copy for the City Clerk for inclusion in the official record. Our upcoming meetings in March, on the 5th, next Tuesday, we have our State of the City at 7:30. I believe that's at Hager Hall. And also on the 5th, we have our 4 o'clock work session. Again, on the 12th and the 19th, 4 o'clock work sessions. And then Tuesday, the 26th, our regular session at 7 p.m. At this time, we will have citizen comments. Thank you. And I'm just going to take them in the order that they are listed. I just would remind citizens that comments are limited to 5 minutes per individual. The meetings are televised and recorded, so your comments will be on air and on tape. The first person is Matthew Sullivan. And if you don't mind coming up to the podium here, stating your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Matthew Sullivan. My address is 210 South Mulberry Street, Hagerstown. I'm voicing a concern over an ordinance that was passed by the city concerning C2 zoning, specifically used car dealers. On the land management code, it has automobile and truck sales limited in the CG district to a minimum use area of 40,000 square feet. The only reason I'm making comment now and not earlier is because I frankly did not know this was an issue that was going to be voted or would have any comments that were invited by to open to the public. When this ordinance was passed and voted on by the city, it took basically about at least 10 commercial properties and made them non-conforming. I don't know how the Planning Commission, I don't know what their idea was with making it almost an acre for a car lot, but there's car lots around town, and now making them non-conforming, it does change the situation if they would just stop business for a while or change their use and then go back to a car lot. Under the Motor Vehicle Administration rules, their requirements for location requirements are 10 cars with customer parking, space for 10 cars. The one property I own is now a car lot. We have maybe 10,000 square feet instead of the 40 as requested here, and we probably have like 25 cars in that lot. So, I know the city's in the process of promoting business and has a good relationship with the business people, but I think making an ordinance like this, especially the city was not real communicative with making it known that there would be comments about this change, or I learned it through the grapevine, and the last time I was involved in any kind of thing like this, we actually received a letter and certified mail and such, and this was done. The way this was done was, I didn't know. I just didn't know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Timothy Gipe. Please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I'll try not to repeat some of Matthew Sullivan is my business partner. I got a notice because we had graffiti on the side of our building. I had a picture. I took care of it. The city was paving a road on another property I own on Virginia Avenue, and I had to fix some curbing, sidewalk. I got a notice. I did repairs. They're going to make my building a non-conforming use, and I don't get a notice. It's voted on and passed, and I didn't get a notice of becoming non-conforming. Had I leased that property out for some other use other than the auto sales it is right now, it would not have been able to return. I don't understand how that a city can conduct business in that manner. It just doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just me. I mean, this morning's paper, the city has SOAR looking at ways to revive the downtown. They want to work with state, local, city, county, private investors. Backyard grill closing. Several businesses have recently closed, Bickles, Spin, etc. The notice in the paper, I have a copy of the notice that was put in if you wanted to come down and speak before it was actually voted on, if anyone would want to see it. Because you would never, ever show up to speak on that change. It's impossible. July 10th minutes on page 4 and 5, when they were before the ordinance was voted on. Number 5 was increased flexibility for reuse of old buildings. Number 8 is reduce minimum size requirements for schools, churches, and funeral homes. Now, a short time later, Councilmember Metzner and Councilmember Brubaker are probably the only two that voted. They voted to make auto sales almost an acre, 40,000 square feet. I think an acre is 43,350, something like whatever. I mean, there again, it's just, I only come down tonight because I just looked at so many things that did not make any sense to me. If it makes sense, fine. Now, in defense of planning and zoning, the article in the paper was very vague, but Ms. Mayor did state in the minutes of a meeting, August 14th, that the changes, this isn't word for word, but you can look it up, the changes may make existing businesses non-conforming. I looked all through the minutes, found no further comment on, unless they don't write down everything that's said, which could have happened. But nobody asked what businesses, why would we want to make businesses non-conforming, especially in this economy? There's another thing, just doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Okay, Matt already said that. Let's see what else I got. Try to stay within my 5 minutes. No, I'm not a car salesman. I guess the only thing I really have is, I just have a question. Now, there is a Board of Zoning Appeals, and would this be a matter that someone would take to that or not?
No.
That's just not this doesn't qualify for that.
No, that would be for a specific case that either was in violation of the existing code, or
Okay.
if they wanted to do something that they needed some kind of variance
Right.
for the code.
Right. And the last thing I have is, now that we're, when you're non-conforming, it's highly likely that you're going to grow a business. You're not going to buy a property next door and make your business larger if you're non-conforming. You probably won't get a permit. I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to get a permit to add on to your building. I know there's just a different circumstance. So, I mean, it does greatly affect. And it's more than one property. It's quite a few properties. And like I said, I didn't get to come down and speak before it was voted on because I didn't know about it. And, I mean, tonight's the night to just get it out there. And I hope someone does take a look at it and look at it carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. The next citizen to come on the list is Jeff Cooper.
Hello,
Hello,
my name
sir.
is Jeff Cooper. Live at 19227 Rock Maple Drive. I have the car lot up in Classic Cars on Burhans Boulevard. It's about a third of an acre. It's kind of small. And what I was really worried about, on down the road, if I retire and decide to sell that property, it wouldn't be able to be used for a used car lot anymore, and it probably would make the value half.
It could still be used as a used car lot.
Pardon?
It could still be used as a used car lot when you sell it.
The non-conforming use can be transferred as long as it's not out of use for, I think, a period of
It
one.
has to be out of use for
So
two.
if it was out for 2 years, then
Right.
you couldn't put one back in there.
Right. But you could sell it as a car lot.
But it
and
would
as
have to
long
be
as it
running
contain-
or-
As long as it doesn't go out of its use for 2 consecutive years.
Okay.
It could still stay as use of car lot forever.
Okay, that was one of my main concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, is it Feuerstein? Thank you.
I have some paperwork here. I'll give it to the clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I think that's all his sticker in your car.
My name is Bill Feuerstein. I have a Salem Avenue Auto Exchange up on 1433 Salem Avenue. Lou and I go back to shared stays and
Absolutely.
long time ago.
Yes, sir.
Lou can kind of tell you that I owned Snowburgers over in Waynesboro when Norm had passed away, or before Norm passed away, and I had 3 franchises on less than 40,000 square feet. Had the biggest dealer in Waynesboro at the time. I guess what I'm talking about here is I know what everybody's after. Believe it or not, I'm the past director for the Used Car Dealer Association for the state of Maryland and Delaware. My phone's been ringing off the hook on this situation. There was threats made and everything. I said, listen, let's go talk to them and ask for some help. So that's what I'm here for. I talked to George Manis today, which is head of the Dealer Association for the state of Maryland, and got some ideas from him. And the best idea I got is to say that I've just turned down $1.2 million for my property in the west end of Hagerstown through some developers that wanted to buy that whole corner. I turned it down. I can't see how my property can be worth that kind of money, and you put me in non-conforming use because I'm a little short of 40,000 square feet. That's a lot of property, okay? Now, I've been fighting, and you have paperwork there, I've been fighting curb stoning. Excuse me, I have cancer, okay? And I take chemo, so sometimes I lose my voice, so I apologize.
No worries.
Anyway, I bought this, I don't want to jump around here. I bought this, been this pretty much, let me go back. That's what they call chemo brain. I lost what I was saying. I fought for years here curb stoning through the Dealer Association. I have notes here of when I met with the Sheriff's Department, the City Department, and this was in 2005. And if you notice the paperwork I got you, we got forms made out for curb stoning. Curb stoning has not changed. There's more people selling cars in the city limits than dealerships are. Right down the dual highway, you'll see 4 or 5 cars sitting in driveways without tags on them. And the police don't have, they can only do so much. But here you are now. This is my livelihood. I have, if I pass away, what you're saying is I need to keep my lot open. So what I'm going to do is probably turn it into a repair facility. You're going to have junk cars sitting all over the place. And let me say something to you. For every used car dealership here, we add to the value of downtown Hagerstown. If we don't, nobody would come into our lots. We have to keep them clean. Okay, now, I also go along with the gas station selling cars. I don't agree with that. If this is what that was meant for, state it. We'll work with you. Okay, we don't think there should be 2 businesses, or nobody does, in a small facility, a repair facility.
Were you able to review the staff report?
No.
Please, before you leave, will you make sure you all get one? It at least explains their rationale. Whether
Okay.
you agree with it, at least you'll understand their rationale, and then perhaps we can have you meet with staff to go over their thoughts.
I'd be glad to.
This was a comprehensive zoning which did the entire city. On a lot of issues, we did have a lot of people speak, and I certainly apologize to you and everyone else. Only Martin and I are here from the prior administration that did this. There certainly was never an intent to keep people from knowing. This was a massive undertaking involving the entire city rezoning, and obviously things fell through the cracks when it came to notifying you all. We had a lot of people come in on other properties that were becoming non-conforming uses and doing other things, and clearly, obviously you all didn't get noticed, but at least if you see this, you guys will at least understand the rationale, and maybe we can all work from there to see what we can do to solve the issues.
I'd be glad to.
I know you would, and I wanted to let you know this was
Okay,
here.
and I would before, if I can't really stay, okay? If the clerk can have one for me, I'll be glad
Sure.
to pick one up on my way out. Really, that's, the only thing I'm asking is take another look at it, okay? You all have to do the changes. It's already law. There's nothing we can do. We're not going to go through this legislation. We're not going to do that. You know, I think it's bad for, you know, the only person this is good for is the new car dealers. Think about it. If you go out to the auto mall, they have acres and acres and acres. But you're talking about eventually, down the road, closing up every used car lot in the city limits. There's not one that I can fit, including Sherritt's on the dual highway, that has 40,000 square feet of property. Now, and you're just talking about so much money just going down the drain. You know, if I die, okay, and I'm turning my dealership into repair facilities, you're going to have junk cars sitting everywhere. You're going to have Bodie Grimm coming up there, you know, with his parts cars. You know, that's not what we want. We want a clean establishment where the city can be proud and saying, boy, look at how nice that used car lot looks. Please, help us.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, I do think this might be a topic that we bring at a future work session to take another look at, so I appreciate everybody commenting on that, and thanks for that.
Thank you.
No problem. We have one more person signed up for citizen comments. That's Mr. Harold Wills.
I am Harold Edward Wills, and I live at 149 Summit Avenue in Hagerstown, and it's with great joy that I look at you all and know that indeed democracy does work. Just a few things I wanted to mention. This recently happened because of the fire on Antietam Street, where South Potomac Street to Summit Avenue was blocked with signs, as it should have been, that no through traffic. However, I had to go through a tremendous amount of trouble to get a sign that was put there that should have been there from the beginning, that stated that Summit Avenue East was closed also. And once you got back there, if you made the mistake like I did a number of times of forgetting, you reached a cul-de-sac because you could not go any further. That has now been remedied, ironically with a sign that was a recycled Brucci for Mayor sign. But anyway, moving right along, the next thing I would just like to suggest is that I'm very concerned about the property that I understand is now the property of the city of Hagerstown, Prospect Street, Washington Street, and the alley, I'm calling it the Midtown Holiday Inn, whatever property. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Okay. I do not know how many people are as architecturally tuned in as I am, but that building that is sitting there at the corner of North Prospect, or North Prospect and Washington Street is a textbook example, and it is printed, and I don't have access to the library, is considered one of the finest examples of Richardsonian Romanesque architecture in the world. Now, how many people are aware of that? I don't know. I don't know what the plans are for that building. how many decades ago somebody went in there and painted that poor thing blue. But it's as solid as a rock. It's made out of granite this big. Huge treasure. And I'm just bringing this to your attention because I don't know what's going to be happening. But the beautiful building that I grew up watching as I was a school child, the Rochester House, it's gone. And I hate to see the one right across the street go too. So I don't know what's planning, but I just wanted to add that. Also, as a senior citizen, I'd love to have a place to work out. I know that you all are interested in doing something as far as senior citizens and a senior citizen center. I would like to see it in the YMCA, the old YMCA building. I spent many a happy year there. But as far as the old Armory building, isn't that the building that is being tossed about too? I don't know, it's been called everything but the old Armory building, which is what I know it by. I don't care where I would go. I would like to have a place where I would be welcome as a senior citizen and not feel intimidated. Finally, the block where I am, the 100 block, is a place that is a favorite parking place for a lot of city employees, employees of downtown businesses, lawyers, etc. Which means during the day, those of us who live there cannot park our cars, unless, of course, we make a mistake and park there on Wednesday and then get a $15 ticket because they want to clean the street. That sidewalk, if you look at it, you will see that there are holes that were put there when the sidewalk was put in place to put parking meters. And I've been talking to many people for many years about putting parking meters back there, because that would mean that the people who are parking there now would have to use the public facilities like the parking decks and therefore get the revenue and give us our spaces back as residents of downtown Hagerstown, the place to park our car. And I was talking to Julie Rivet tonight, who I think many of you know, and we both decided the same thing, that it would be good to have stickers on those cars of those of us who are tax-paying citizens there that would be exempt from those parking meters. But I really don't care. I really think the parking meters should be back. Long ago, I abandoned the idea of parking my car out in front of the house. My car has been too much vandalized and too much damaged by allowing it to be parked. And even parking in back of my house in a garage is dangerous, but at least I'm not on the public street. And that's all I have to say tonight, but I am indeed gratified that the Lord, at the age of 68, has granted me the vista that I have tonight by looking at all of you. God bless.
You're too kind, Mr. Wills. And let me just respond to your question about the Midtown Motel. The plan is not to demolish the building in the front, at least from the city's perspective. The plan is to demolish the motel part in the back, and then to do some prep work to kind of fix up the place inside, to do some interior work, mainly fix the windows, waterproof the roof, and then the idea is that it would go back into the private market for redevelopment.
Is there any plans to get rid of that blue paint?
That I do not know. That may be part of it.
How about Dayglow Orange? Would that be good?
Oh, no.
Any other comments from the citizens in attendance tonight? All right. We will conclude the city citizen comments, and we will move into our public hearing. First, we'll have the staff come up and make their presentation.
Good evening. This is Annexation Case A-2012-01, proposed annexation for Tri-State Holdings LLC at 12305 Delwood Avenue. This property proposed for annexation is on as I said earlier, is on Delwood Avenue, which is in the Cedar Lawn subdivision. That would be if you're heading out West Washington Street, go across 81, and that development would be on the right-hand side if you're heading west. The property is in the Cedar Lawn subdivision, which was developed, I believe, in the mid to late 60s. This particular property is contiguous to the Snook Farm annexation, which was annexed by the city in 2006. As I stated earlier, the property is owned by Tri-State Holdings LLC, and the property currently contains a recently constructed single-family dwelling. In 2012, the property owner, the developer, requested city water service to this property, and under the city's annexation policy, any contiguous property to the city limits must file a petition for annexation in exchange for city water service. The city did receive that petition this past November. In the petition for annexation, the applicant had requested the annexation be denied by the city on the argument that providing city services to this property would be, quote, prove more costly than the city than is apparent. Planning staff had reached out to several departments, including city fire, police, engineering, utilities, and finance and public works to determine what kind of impact this annexation would have on city services. The response that we got from each of the departments was that this property poses no significant impact to city operations if annexed. Just a couple of things more about the property. The total acreage is 0.29 acres. That includes the lot as well as a small portion of unimproved alley right-of-way between it and the Snook Farm. Current county zoning is RS, residential suburban, and if annexed, the proposed city zoning would be R mod, residential moderate density. That's formerly the R1 zoning district. Since RS zoning and R mod zoning are generally consistent in terms of what they allow and what their bulk requirements are, we determined that no express approval zoning change was needed from the county, since the two are relatively consistent with one another. This is a picture of the property in question. This is the single-family house on the lot. Following the introduction of the annexation resolution and the adoption of the plan last month, we fulfill the requirements of annexation review. We sent a copy of those documents to the state and county for a 30-day review and comment period. As of right now, we have received no comments from either the state or the county concerning this annexation. And at this time, I'd also like to enter into the record the certificate of advertisement in the file by reference. I'll just give you an idea of the annexation process. Again, we adopted the annexation plan and introduced the annexation resolution last month. We're having the public hearing tonight. We'll bring this back to you for further consideration and a future work session, and if the council adopts the annexation, it would become effective 45 days after adoption. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from council members? No? Then the next part of the hearing will be comments from the public. Would anyone in the public like to testify? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Mayor and Council.
Hi.
My name is Kathleen Gray, and my husband,
Harold.
and we're here because we own this beautiful home on 12305 Delwood Avenue. When we had talked to our real estate agent, she had said that we would be in the county, which we were so happy because we've been renting for 5 years, and we were excited to be in the county. And there was no home there, and we agreed to sign, and then we learned later, after we signed the contract, that it was annexed into the city, and we didn't know what that meant. So that's why we're here. What's going on?
The reason the petition for annexation is, I think, to receive the city's water services.
Right. So that's
correct?
what we're here to say. I mean, my husband and I, we can take care of our own trash, and we don't need the city police because we have county police there. And as far as the water goes, my question would be that it's in a cul-de-sac, so there's probably 30 homes on that street, and where did those people get their water? I mean, why does our single home signal out that we have to pay, you know, city taxes for this home. You know, I mean, it just, we just don't know why.
From what I understand, we'd be the only ones paying city taxes and county taxes in that whole area.
That's because the folks that were receiving water had homes there long before the city adopted its annexation policy. It's probably been in effect for over a decade now. And that annexation policy says that you cannot receive city water or sewer services unless you annex into the city. That's the reason. So had your home been developed prior to that and receiving services, so nobody who was currently receiving services at the time, they can't be compelled to annex into the city. But those on property that had not had those services hooked up, that is the answer.
We are very proud owners of this home, and we just hate to see that, you know, we're in a budget, and city and county, I'd hate to see us have to sell, because I just don't know what the cost of this is going to be, so.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. I think you will find there are many benefits to being a part of the city of Hagerstown, not the least of which is receiving the city services. But I do think that the double taxation issue has been addressed in that the county is now has lowered the rate, or maybe someone can explain it better than I am about how the double taxation issue has been addressed. But I do think that you will find more benefits than drawbacks to being a part of the city of Hagerstown. And I know our police chief has already said, you know, they've got you covered out there. So, you know, there are benefits also to being in this city, in addition to having to pay city taxes.
Well, I appreciate your input, and I just hope all goes well. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any other public testimony?
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Andrew Wilkinson, 13424 Pennsylvania Avenue, Suite 302, Hagerstown. Mayor and Council, I'm an attorney here in Hagerstown. I represent the applicant, Tri-State Holdings, LLC. Mr. Warbaugh is correct that the application was originally filed in order to grant the extension of the sewer service. In our application, as Alex did indicate, we requested that the application actually be denied. We appreciate the city's policy, as Mr. Metzner just indicated. We do note that the policy does provide that the city can grant exception to the requirement of actual annexation, such that the application for annexation is sufficient in order to tie into the sewer system, but that the council can then grant an exception to actually annex. I really have two reasons why you could deny the annexation at your next hearing. The first is a legal reason, sort of boring. The second is just one of those common sense approaches. The legal reason that I think you could deny this application is if you were to make a finding that the property is not actually contiguous to the city boundary. Alex, could we have the first slide that you had there? On back, number one. Not shown, well, somewhat generally shown on this slide, is a platted alley that goes between the Delwood Avenue properties and the corporate limits of Hagerstown. I'll point to it. Generally, this area of land goes back 15 feet wide, platted on plat number, I think it's 178, filed in the land records for Washington County. Mr. Erner will tell you, and he's correct about this, that there's a common law principle that when a property description has a call of the line of the property to an alley or to a street, that there is a presumption that that call means that property owns to the center line of the alley or the street as well. That presumption, though, is rebuttable. If there is indication in the deeds that show half of the alley was not meant to go with the property. The current deed that Mr. and Mrs. Gray have, folks who just talked to you, does not describe their parcel by meets and bounds. It does not describe the lines of their parcels. It only provides that their lot is lot number 47. It does not say lot 47 to the alley. It does not say extending back from Delwood Avenue a certain number of feet to the alley. It simply says lot number 47. The plat indicates lot 47 as not including the 15-foot alley. I'm going to provide these documents to the clerk. It would be the Gray's deed and the plat showing the original subdivision of the property to the clerk. And so what I suggest to you is that if you wanted to find that this was not a contiguous parcel, you can do so by looking at the current deed and looking at the plat, which do not show a call to the alley. And if there's not a call to the alley, if the Gray's deed does not provide half of that alley as being theirs, then there is a 15-foot buffer between the Hagerstown corporate limits as shown on the slide and the Gray's property. Being contiguous is a condition precedent to being able to annex. So if they're not truly contiguous by the deed and by the courses, I don't think you can annex. A similar question arises in, while the farm, its line, may have half of that alley, I don't know that that generally means that there's a presumption that the corporate limits also extend into the alley. I think when this council decides where its corporate limits are going to be, I don't know that this council also says, and we're going to take half of every street that our corporate limit bounds against. My expectation is it's probably the opposite, and that is this council, when it decides where its corporate limit is, that's where it is, not half of another street that bounds against it. The second reason I think you can deny the annexation petition is that common sense issue that I think the Grays talked about. I appreciate Councilman Metzner's comments that the annexation policy is in place. It requires that for the extension of sewer or water that property be annexed. But simply by looking at the screen, what we're talking about is annexing one house in an entire neighborhood to the west of what is currently the Snook parcel that was annexed in mid-2000s. It looks to me like to the east then there's a whole nother neighborhood that's not annexed in. But all of those properties, I presume, are getting city water. They're paying for it. They have it. Those lines are sitting right down the middle of those streets, I would imagine. No other property is being required or has ever been required to annex into the city. Only the Grays. From a common sense perspective, I appreciate that the policy's in place. But I think this is one of those situations where when you step back and you look at the map, you have to say, does it really make sense for the city to take that property into the corporate limits? I appreciate the ability of the Hagerstown City Police Department to do the job, fire to do the job, trash to come pick up the trash. From a police and a fire services standpoint, I don't think the issue would lie with the county's ability to provide that protection or the city's ability. I think it's putting the 911 center into a position that their computer and their people who are working those phones better know that when a call comes from 12305 Delwood, it's going to Hagerstown City Police, not Washington County, because that's in the city. And it's going to Hagerstown Fire, not another local fire department. That's where the pressure comes to bear. Not at City HPD, not at the County Sheriff's Department. At the 911 center is where the pressure is brought to bear when we take only one property out of an entire neighborhood and say, this property is now in the city. And so for all those reasons, I would respectfully request that the council deny the petition. Yes, sir.
I just have a couple of questions. And it speaks to those 2 points. The first is, I see the map that you provided, and is the alley that is identified, has that been accepted by any specific governing body within their acquired and dedicated road system?
I don't know, Commissioner, or Councilman.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because on this deed that you provided, it says in paragraph 4 that together with the buildings and improvements thereon erected, made, and being, and all and every the rights, alleys, ways. I mean, it clearly indicates that if there is an alley, and I'm certainly very familiar with paper alleys and how they work and how they function over time and how they're created and abandoned, whether it's Greenberry Hills or Cedar Lawn development. So when I read that and I review the map, the indication would be that if this isn't a dedicated right-of-way, then that right-of-way would revert. In other words, if it's not a recorded, dedicated right-of-way that has been accepted by a public body, then it would revert to its original land application or landowner, whatever the case may be in this original development, and thus revert to being contiguous to that original parcel that exists, because no governing body has thus accepted it in a proper form of dedication.
And I don't know if the preparer of this deed provided or the intention was that the alley that is platted on Platfolio 178 was no longer to exist and that was mere surplusage or what it means. But what I can say is that the deed provides only for lot 47.
And those alleys associated with it.
Understood. But again, I don't know if the intent was to convey the alley or whether that is just a standard form from this particular title company.
And regardless if a governing body hasn't accepted it, it reverts back to that original inception.
It may, but even then, the presumption that we discussed was that lot 47 would only have one half of that alley.
And the other half already being in the city.
If you're taking a step, which is our corporate boundary isn't exactly where we said it was, we're also going to take half of that alley.
And
we, the city. When we set down a corporate boundary, we don't mean just where the boundary is. We also mean half of every road that our corporate boundary touches is within the city.
Right. But we can't make the argument that it is a privately held property and thus a boundary and an obstacle to jump that process, and at the same time argue that it is a street system that we shouldn't. I mean, I just don't understand how you can make both arguments.
I'm an attorney, it's easy. No, what I'm saying to you, Councilman, is that if you take the deed as you're reading it, which means lot 47 goes halfway to the alley, you must also be saying that in order to create continuity, that when the city council lays down its corporate boundaries, it also means the city is going to extend its corporate boundary to the midline of every road that touches that corporate boundary.
And I think that applies to whatever the original inception of that property reverts to in each specific case. The second point, and I'm certainly familiar with the annexation policy, is that common sense would dictate that you would simply let this lot go. If we are to accept that argument, then I think that we are to then accept the argument of annexation at face value, that what we are practicing in this methodology is the absence of common sense, whereby allowing water and other city services to be extended to those areas outside of the city's corporate boundaries was the common sense approach. And I'm not certain as a council member sitting here that I could accept the argument that what we would practice in extending our services in exchange for annexation would be a lack of common sense. Rather, the argument that the mode of operation of not requiring annexation as a part of extension of city services was not the logical direction to take.
And what I would submit to you, Councilman, is that what would seem more logical to me is that the city utilize the remainder of the annexation policy and take the burden upon itself to take the whole street or annex the whole neighborhood, as opposed to one parcel within it.
Well, we can't make people annex.
Sell the case.
But we can, to some degree. I mean,
You can.
state article clearly allows us to annex, I believe, less than 1% of property of the total, or less than 1% of the voting population as a base of the corporate entity.
No.
Well, thank you for that lively debate. I don't think we're going to solve it tonight. Do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
No, that's all, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make any public testimony about this case? I'll just say for the record, I'm a strong supporter of annexation. I believe that for decades, the city provided its services outside its corporate boundaries and never asked for annexation in return, and therefore we have lost out on a lot of the extension of our tax base as well, and have is the reason why we find ourselves somewhat in the situation we're in now with our deteriorating tax base. So I think that I certainly support this annexation as well as all the other annexations that have to do with the acquisition of city services. Any other public testimony? All right. Any other comments from the council or from staff?
I think we'd want to add it to the work session agenda. We'll bring this back. John will be there to help explain some of these issues too, just to clarify that. But he doesn't feel he has to say anything for the purposes of the record tonight.
And we will keep the record open for 10 days if anyone would like to submit any written testimony at that time. All right. Public hearing is now closed, and we are going to move on to approval of minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of minutes as presented for the mayor and council meetings held on January 8th, January 15th, January 22nd, and January 29th, all of 2013.
Could I, before we move on, I'd like you to amend the motion, please, because the 29th minutes are not yet available.
Excuse me.
Could you please amend your motion? Or withdraw the
We
first
would
motion?
exclude the 29th in that motion.
And I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Metzner and seconded by Mr. Munson. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Metzner, seconded by Mr. Brubaker. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, the consent agenda is approved. There is no unfinished business for this meeting, so we're on to new business. First of which is an introduction of an ordinance to amend the land management code definition of a minor subdivision.
Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and council introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 140 Land Management Code of the City Code to revise the definition of a minor subdivision to 7 or fewer residential lots.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Brubaker and seconded by Mr. Metzner. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Ordinance is introduced. Next is the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance definition of a minor subdivision.
Mr. Mayor, I have moved the mayor and council introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 47 Adequate Public Facilities of the City Code to revise the definition of minor subdivision to 7 or fewer units.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Metzner and seconded by Mr. Alshire. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Ordinance is introduced. Next, we have the approval of a resolution, a memorandum of understanding between the Hagerstown Police Department and Department of Defense for equipment.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for mayor and council approval of a resolution to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the United States Department of Defense for the acquisition of decommissioned equipment from the Department of Defense. This program carries no cost to the city and comes with a stipulation that the equipment be returned to the DoD once it is deemed no longer of use to the department.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Alshire and seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The resolution is approved. Next up is the approval of a resolution for an easement agreement with Potomac Plaza LLC for structural connections to the wall at 44 North Potomac Street.
Mayor, hereby move for approval of a resolution to authorize the execution of an easement agreement with Potomac Plaza LLC, property owners of 44 North Potomac Street. This agreement will allow the city to anchor structural members to the wall at 44 North Potomac Street for the 3640 North Potomac Street Artists Apartment renovation project. The agreement also acknowledges pre-existing encroachment of 36 to 40 North Potomac Street structural members into the 44 North Potomac Street wall, requires the city to make repairs to the wall if any damage occurs as a result of the city's structural connections.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Brubaker and seconded by Mr. Metzner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The resolution is approved. Next up is the approval of an amendment to the Fairgrounds Cell Tower Chantel lease agreement.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for mayor and council approval of a lease amendment with Shenandoah Personal Communications Company Chantel at the Fairgrounds Cell Tower to accommodate additional and upgraded equipment and to upgrade the facility. Under this amendment, the estimated completion date is April 15, 2013. There is no change in the monthly fees to Chantel.
Motion is made by Mr. Alshire and seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion? I just wanted to make mention that this means that basically there'll be a new flagpole going in at the Fairgrounds Park.
Same height, a little bit larger diameter, same rent or payment of $550 a month.
The only questions I have, are all the other conditions the same? Because I see there seems to be a lot of things in here other than just saying they can upgrade. For instance, the flag responsibility, was that always the same as it's written now? Was Chantel giving us 2 flags and then it being our responsibility to replace flags thereafter?
I think that's the change based on, let's see, Let me just read through the memo from last week. It involves installation of 6-foot-high vinyl fence. There'll be a portable tower during the construction of the new one. Let me just check here. Requirements of the city to replace warn flags, remove when able during storms, replacement of spotlight bulbs. That appears to be an amendment.
Why are we changing that? I mean, why are we allowing Chantel to upgrade while at the same time reducing their obligations?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and check and see.
And how long was the original agreement for?
What the well, it was established in 2004. Yeah, those are some questions that we could have addressed last week, but I'm afraid I can't
understand.
address this week.
It's totally my fault. I
No,
don't put that on staff. I didn't answer those questions. But when I look at this, I wonder why we would be giving up rights to allow them to upgrade. And I think until we get those answers, that we should table this.
Okay. Yeah, I can't clarify for sure.
And I
the
apologize
requirement on
to
the
staff
flags.
and the balance of council for not asking those questions. But it concerns me that we're completely replacing the maintenance paragraph in here, and I suspect that the replacement is putting obligations on the city that the city didn't have under the original agreement. And I'm not so sure why we would do that. Seems to me we would almost want to do the opposite. But so I would move that we table this.
All right. Have a motion to table and a second. All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Motion is tabled.
And I apologize, Bruce.
No, that's okay. We'll get that clarified next week.
Next up on the agenda under new business is approval of Dublin at the Diamond Festival and the addition of Maryland State Lottery Keno at Municipal Stadium.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of the non-game event Dublin at the Diamond Festival on Saturday, March 16, 2013. The event will commence immediately following the St. Patrick's Day 5K race in downtown. I also move for the approval of the addition of the Maryland State Lottery Keno equipment at the stadium and authorize staff to execute the required application to allow the Suns to place the equipment in the stadium.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Metzner and seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion?
The only thing I would say, Mr. Mayor, is that last year I think was the inaugural of the St. Patrick's Day race, and it was, to say the least, highly successful. I hope that this year will be even more successful, and I think it's a great idea for the Sun to find a way to couple up with that. And as you so succinctly say, Mr. Mayor, repeatedly, connect our downtown with the East End and the stadium, and that seems to me what this is doing.
Mr. Brubaker?
I'm very reluctant on the Keno phase of this, but I did not express it at the work session, and I will go along with this. But coming back from Annapolis last week, I went to the, which I realize is a much larger manifestation of the gambling, but the Arundel Mills complex, and I find it very discouraging. But I did not indicate so last week, and I do want to maintain the viability of a team and events in Hagerstown, so I will reluctantly vote in favor.
All right. Anyone else? Discussion?
What, maybe to put some of Marty's concerns at ease, what process would be in place if that part of the operations became less than envisioned, less than satisfactory to the operations overall?
Well,
We can always undo what we do.
yeah, I mean, we're granting them permission as a property owner.
Okay.
But not approving the Keno. That has to come from the state. I mean, we're giving them the opportunity to apply to the state. So I think compliance issues would be addressed by the state if there was any issue over the operation of the game. What would you envision as?
Well, it's a very simple answer that we have a lease with the Suns that is, as I recall, either party can give 90 days to end it.
Yeah, this would,
So, I mean,
be an amendment,
ultimately, the answer is when you have that kind of clause in a lease, if you're dissatisfied with the operations of the lessee, you give them notification that if they don't change the way they're doing business, is you're going to terminate the lease. Sort of like when you have a city administrator, if you don't like the way they're doing things, you tell them to change or things happen.
Nice example.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Metzger, for that.
Very good analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion?
Well, I guess if we start down this road, we grant this now, but in the future, we could withdraw that permission if there was issues with it and the lease term was over. Is that?
Even if the lease term wasn't over?
Well, I mean beyond the drastic extreme of giving notice to cancel the lease.
But I mean, that's when you say, what can you do about it? That's ultimately, and not that you say you're canceling the lease because of it, but you say this is unacceptable, and if it doesn't be, you say that's your ultimate option. I mean,
well,
we hope you don't have to go there.
Yeah, I did not bring this up, and I don't feel it's fair to the rest of you to vote against it on that, and it's endemic throughout the state and throughout our community, so it's not like it abolishes the issue. It's just sort of a moral thing or a problem I have with gambling, and those were the people who's it's removing income from that don't need to have it removed. But I will vote for it.
Personal responsibility is always the way to go. Any other discussion on this particular motion? I believe the motion was made by Mr. Metzner and seconded by Mr. Munson. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. All right, next is the approval of a Hagerstown Pony League loan waiver.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move to waive the $6,000 loan balance as requested by the Pony League officials. The loan was for certain fence improvements to the facility in Funkhauser Park in 2006.
Second.
There's been a motion made and a second. Any discussion?
I would just reiterate my opposition and offer of an alternative of waiving the cost for this year and phasing that in $1,000 a year over the remaining term, rather than waiving it in its entirety. It appears that if we are going to approve such expenses by private organizations to city-owned facilities, that they go through a process of vetting within our budget, and if that's not going to be the process, then it makes it a little difficult, when we consider those under different terms at a later date.
I also feel that I would be willing to alleviate the terms of the loan and extend the terms, but I do not feel that we should be waiving the loan altogether, setting that precedent.
Any other comments? All right. Motion is made by Mr. Munson, seconded by Ms. Nye. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
The motion carries 3-2. Next up is the approval of purchase, replacement of engine 1, 1994 pumper.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council approval of the purchase of a KME pumper to replace engine 1 at the First Hose Fire Company in the amount of $447,000 and $17,000 from Kodovac Mobile Equipment in Pennsylvania. First, Hagerstown Hose has agreed to contribute $150,000 towards the purchase of the apparatus. The city of Hagerstown share is $297,600. 17, which is included in future bond proceeds. And if anyone wants to tell me how to pronounce the name of the town,
I think it's Nesquehoning,
that sounds good to me.
Pennsylvania is where that company is located. Motion made by Mr. Metzner and seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion? All those in favor of this approval of purchase, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Approval for that purchase. Next up is the approval of administration of dental coverage for FY 2013 to 14 with United Concordia.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for approval of United Concordia, UCCI, to administer the dental coverage for City of Hagerstown employees and retirees for a minimum of 3 years beginning in FY 13-14. UCCI has provided a projected savings of $26,000 over a 3-year period. The change to UCCI will offer our participants a larger network of dental providers, as well as a nationwide network for those participants who live outside of Maryland.
Motion made by Mr. Alshire, seconded by Mr. Brubaker. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question. I just want to know if all employees are aware of this.
As far as I know, they are, Penny.
Okay, because I mean, I've not heard anything from anybody, and I just don't want the attack on.
Yeah, it goes through the healthcare committee.
Yes.
And so that's set up so that there's communication. Now, there are a couple dentists that are currently under the prior program that won't be under this one, but we're adding dentists that are widely used by employees that currently aren't included in our program. So that was part of the discussion, that we'll be able to serve more employees who have dentists that will be under the new program as opposed to the existing one.
Well, and that's what I was told when, you know, I
So
had talked to Human Resources. But again, I just want to know that everybody knows, okay? It's not like no communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they'll certainly be made aware of the expansion of the program, the larger network. I mean, HR does that communication.
All right.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. The next item is the approval of an amendment to the power service agreement between the City of Hagerstown and Allegheny Energy Company, Supply Company, LLC.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council approve the amendment to the power service agreement between the City of Hagerstown and Allegheny Energy Supply Company, LLC. The existing power service agreement has been extended for a period of 1 year from the initial expiration date of May 31st, 2014 through a new expiration date of May 31st, 2015. The megawatt hour charged for service during the aforementioned 1 year period will become $53.90.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Brubaker and seconded by Mr. Metzner. Discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what's the present megawatt cost?
I don't know that particular answer. I know Mr. Spiker's here and he could mention it. And while he's coming up to make that statement, I just want to thank him for all the work that he's done on this issue. And I hope that the press picks this up and makes it front page news, that the City of Hagerstown, the citizens who receive city light, will actually be getting a reduced cost for their electricity. Please explain.
News.
Pay $64.85 a megawatt hour. June 1 of this year, it will go to $54.33. June 1 of 2014, it'll go to $53.90. So I just blended the last 2 years in together when I did the 9%. And the citizens need to really thank the mayor and council for allowing us to use some judgment, be conservative in our approach, and allow us to basically, at the end of the memo, save $1.7 million by doing 1 year contracts and not locking in for long extensions. So I thank you all and the citizens for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
An advantage of living in the city, at least the old city.
At least in the old city grid.
Yep.
What is it, the 1947 boundaries? 43, the 1943 boundaries. Okay, the motion's been made by Mr. Brubaker and seconded by Mr. Metzner. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Last but not least is the approval of a full-time police technologist position.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move to approve adding one full-time headcount for the police technologist position to support police operations. This position will increase the information technology and support services full-time position count by one from March 1st, 2013 to December 15th, 2013. And the costs associated with this position are covered by the COPS technology grant.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Nye, and I heard Mr. Brubaker seconded first, so he gets the second on that. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it. And that brings us to the city administrator's comments.
Just one this evening, which is to remind people yard waste collection resumes next week. So we're back into the yard waste collection season.
And I'm already dreaming about getting back into my yard and digging around.
That sounds good.
Any other comments?
That's it for me.
All right, now on to the mayor and council comments. I always start alphabetically, so I'm going to start over here with Ms. Nye tonight.
Now, I just want to know that somebody is communicating with the gentleman that lives on Hager Street. I'm seeing all of these emails coming in. So I know that they've gone to the mayor as well as to the chief of police and a lot of the police department. I just need to know that somebody is communicating with him.
I think the police have been very responsive. I've been getting updates on.
I mean, it
activities
seems
going
to
on
be
there.
that it's more than just that, you know, it seems to be code, you know, a lot of stuff, so.
Various issues.
Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Munson.
No comments tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Metzner.
Very briefly, I would just hope that this administration goes all hands on deck in the next 30 days to bring a proposal forth to the Board of Education. I agree with what Councilmember Alshire said repeatedly. It's not our job to dictate to them where they should go, not our job to criticize any decision they make, but it is our job to make sure that if they do not come to the city of Hagerstown downtown, that we don't hear that the reason is that we didn't come forth with a proposal for them. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mr. Brubaker.
Yes, I said in the invocation that we face hard decisions between a rock and a hard place quite often, and even though they're relatively small issues, I appreciate Pony League Baseball a lot. All efforts run by volunteers and the many nonprofit organizations that we have in this town and our area, and the work that goes into it. So it's a judgment between examples we set when we loan money to other organizations and what this does, and but it doesn't mean I don't appreciate very much what they do. The same with the Keno. It's available elsewhere all through the community. There's nothing we here can do about it, but it still does bother me personally about extending it still further. But again, you make those decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Alshire.
A couple of things this evening. The first is the received correspondence from Mr. Burkett, and even though the idea at the end of the day that has been extended may not bear fruit, I would just hope that with this downtown business owner that we would at least communicate back and respond and see if the idea has merit.
Andrew Sargent and Rodney Tissue are going to meet
Okay.
with Mr. Burkett.
Mm-hmm. The second item is, I noted in the weekly update as well as in the deliberations of the Board of Zoning Appeals that the expansion of the Salvation Army shelter facility was approved. And I also noted in the weekly report that, while the issue that I had brought up was raised, that they certainly didn't feel it in their purview to deliberate on that more comprehensive item within that specific case, but I do think there continues to be merit to review cases of expansion within neighborhoods, that do have an impact on those neighborhoods and their long-term sustainability. The next item is, unfortunately, I read a ton of circulars in my professional position, and would just note on efficient governing, there was an article about the grand jury fines against the Rosie pension forecast for a jurisdiction in California, and it is a good read and sort of speaks to some of those issues that I raised the other week about, where is the ceiling for us? The expectation going in was, that our pension system would be an expense of X, and since we've been in it, it has, risen to an expense of Y, and what is the ceiling on that, and where do we set that level of acceptability on behalf of the citizens. So anybody interested, I think it gives some perspective to that issue. The next was an article in the MML monthly magazine, and an issue that I think that we need to get moving on and tackle, and that is, and in fact, if you look at the demographic data that staff gave us last week, strategies to deal with vacant and foreclosed properties, there are clearly pockets of that within our community that are specific to neighborhoods, and I would say larger problems within specific neighborhoods. Many of our traditional, traditionally defined homeowner occupied neighborhoods that I think we need a broader, more effective approach at addressing. And the next item is in relation to correspondence that I received in regard to our partnerships that we have with various entities, businesses that we have established partnerships with in the form of loans. And I think that it speaks to our partners in economic progress. And I know that staff got me some information, but I would certainly welcome a discussion on that issue. I think that this mayor and council needs to address that in a very candid and immediate fashion. And I think that we need to get a clear perspective and handle on those debts associated carrying costs that we have in both our utility and general funds for those types of services and loans that we provide as a city to ensure that that doesn't impact additionally on the burden of our tax base and our tax process. The next is, and I think I saw the chief leave, and I'm not certain what venue or if any we were going to have a discussion, but we did get correspondence from the law office of I.C. Cook in regard to the Wells House, and I know there was some public information about that recently. So I know we'll get these from time to time, but I would also welcome a discussion on that issue. And the next item is a follow-up to an email that we received from staff, which was a follow-up to a question that I had posed at our joint meeting with the county commissioners, and I still don't have an answer to this, and that is whether or not the EDC strategic plan was formally adopted or not. And I think that is continues to be of importance to the city, because there are clearly within the 5-year items identified, city having primary responsibility in a number of those, a few of which dealt with a very issue we talked about tonight, which is extension of city services and annexation. And I think that the city, it would behoove us to make some formal comment in response to that plan as it relates to some of those items that may hinder us moving forward in a collective fashion, rather than opening up wounds of the past, so to speak. So I think there are productive items within that that we should at least attempt to weigh in and direct focus on. The next item is the City Department goals and objectives for 2013. I know when we came into office, we sat down briefly and talked about sort of what our goals and initiatives are. I would hope at some point, and I know we've got a lot of things on our plate, but I would certainly welcome at some point to sit down and sort of solidify some of those term goals on some of those bigger issues. And I know it's a bit difficult because we have stadium and Board of Ed and things that are sort of put before us to devote that time to. And the other item is in relation to the demographic data that staff provided. Just want to thank the planning staff and Department of Community Economic Development for providing that, because it definitely painted somewhat of a different picture than I think what folks perceive our downtown with income levels and housing availability as more of a vacant space than an impoverished space. So I think that it would be good to sort of flesh that information out a bit further, and I think that again, analyzing that demographic data would go a long way in sort of determining, within that core of downtown, sort of what's there now and how we're addressing it. And then the last item is in relation to comments associated with the SOAR proposal we received yesterday. I made no illusion of my concern that we have received a proposal from this entity. We have certainly been in discussions. They've met with all different community entities and power brokers, if you will, and as I said yesterday, it is almost impossible for us as a city to solely sign into any form of agreement with this entity or any other and develop a master plan, if you will, if at the end of that plan and the end of this significant expense only by the city, that plan isn't acceptable by the other parties, such as the Board of Ed and the county and Chief and the Chamber and all of those other parties and power brokers that clearly have complementary or concurrent or even conflictory agendas and approaches out there, and I would just reiterate that no matter what entity or what idea it is, I think that those local elected bodies need to be at that table in agreement on sort of what the approach is first before we can take that step, and that's just my 2 cents on the issue, and that's all I have.
That's all?
That's it.
I just want to go back to what Mr. Metzner said, which is that I've been working with the staff feverishly ever since we left the meeting with the Board of Education last week to come up with a solid proposal that I think will be meaningful and significant, and all I would say is stay tuned for the state of the city. And of course, we'll be talking individually about it before then. Also, with what Mr. Alshire said about vacant property, I too got that same article and read it with interest. We have code already existing that has to do with redevelopment, vacant commercial, vacant residential, and urban renewal, and I plan to have those topics on the agenda in a future work session so that we can take a closer look at whether or not the code is meeting our needs. With regard to the Wells House, I just spoke today with our other city attorney, Mr. Nairn, about the status of that, and he explained to me that the letter that was sent, I think I got about 5 copies of that letter, is more of a formality that at this point there's no plan for a lawsuit. It's just a kind of a heads up as a result of the previous litigation. And I think that's all I had. So I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Thanks for being here. Unless anyone has anything else to say, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.